Our thought today is politicians are like babies' diapers. They should be changed often, and for the same reason. Today we have the great Pope Gregory VII, who had a lot of problems with the politicians of his day for trying to interfere with the matters of the church. His name is Gregory VII, known as Hildebrand. Highly recommend learning about his life, one of the great popes of all time, one of the great reformer popes. His reform is called the Gregorian Reform of the Church. It's interesting that May 25th is a unique day because there's 3 different saints you could choose from. Last year I talked about St. Bede the Venerable. The year before that, St. Mary Magdalene de Pazzi. But today I wanted to share for a few moments about the life of this great Pope, Gregory VII. And he was born into a humble family. His father was a blacksmith. As a young man, he desired religious life, so he joined the monastery at Cluny, one of the famous Benedictine monasteries of France. And there he lived a life of holiness, prayer, and penance. Eventually he was chosen to be the prior and then the abbot. And because of his wisdom and knowledge and holiness, the popes would ask him to be their advisor. So during his life, he was an advisor to 5 different popes. And one of the great popes was Leo IX. And the Pope Leo began to reform the church. And the big problems in the church in those days were simony, which was the buying and selling of sacred offices. People would buy, let's say becoming a bishop of this diocese or a cardinal of this diocese or an abbot of a certain monastery. People would buy and sell church offices. So Pope Leo IX began to reform that and ended that simony. And then there was also a big problem with lay investiture, which means that kings and nobles would try to control the church, and they would appoint bishops and cardinals and abbots, and so it was called lay investiture. And of course, the Pope had to reform this, that these important offices had to be assigned by the Pope and not by the local politician or king or nobleman. So these were the big issues, as well as the reform of the clergy. So Leo IX began to reform the church, and to assist him, he asked Hildebrand if he would leave the monastery and come to Rome and be his theological advisor and help him in the reform. So even though Hildebrand loved the monastic life, he loved his Benedictine spirituality, he willingly obeyed the Pope and came to Rome and helped with the reform of the church. And then upon Leo's death, Hildebrand was elected Pope and took the name Gregory VII. He continued the work of Leo's reforms to strengthen the church, and this brought him into great conflict with some of the emperors. For example, Emperor Henry IV of Germany would often persecute the Pope and even assigned his own anti-pope to try to fight against Pope Gregory. Gregory had to excommunicate him 3 times during his life. Henry would pretend to repent and come back into good graces and do penance, but then he would continue to undermine the authority of the Pope and the Church. And even Henry IV came into Rome and captured Rome and took Rome from the Pope. Fortunately, a Catholic prince from Normandy recaptured the city for Gregory, but Gregory still had to go to exile. He was forced out by, again, the politicians of the day, and he died in exile in Salerno. After being the Pope for 12 years, he died in exile, and at the end of his life, he said, "I have loved righteousness and hated iniquity. That is why I die in exile." So, again, only Pope for 12 years, but he did a tremendous job in reforming the church and ending lay investiture, bishops and cardinals and abbots, and then also ending the abuses in the church of simony and the selling of church offices. So we honor today the great Gregory VII, and we continue to pray for the church today, which is always in need of reform because it's made up of both saints and sinners. So the church is always in need of reform, so let's continue to pray.